We are live. Thank you for watching NYSTV. This is your host, John Pounders, and we have my co-host, John Hall, and we have a special guest co-host, D13 Watchman William Kip from D13 Watchman. He's on with us tonight, and we also have the one and only Zen Garcia. I don't know if he's the one and only or not, but I've never heard a name like that before. I've known a lot of Garcias. I grew up in Texas, but never known any with the name Zen. So you guys have heard him on here before. He's had several books that we've discussed on here and several ideas that we've discussed. But he just had a new book come out that's super interesting. He's been on Rob Skiba's show the last couple nights. If you haven't seen it yet, you should go watch those interviews the last couple weeks. It's really insightful. He's done some really good research in this area, and we're excited to have him. But anyways, welcome guys to the show.
Glad to be here.
Good as always, John.
Moo Laka Shaka.
Moo Laka Shaka. Saying it backwards now, but yeah, we're excited, Zen. I mean, I can tell you this, that like some of the stuff that I heard you talking about on Rob's show, I've never heard it before. I mean, I think you're probably one of the first people to bring it out with not just scientific research, but also biblical and extra biblical research that all kind of points to the same exact idea.
Right. Yeah, the book that I just released on the Firmament has so much information that most people have never read, never studied. It includes many books that most people are not familiar with. And I did a comparison study of the Genesis timeline and the biblical narrative as laid out in Genesis, the first 4 days of creation. And in these parallel accounts, like the Book of the Secrets of Enoch, the Chronicles of Jeremiah, the Cave of Treasures, the Book of the Bee, Flavius Josephus, the complete Jewish Bible, because John told me about that, so I included that as well, the narrative of the first 4 days of creation, and just broke them down, each one of them by each day, and then put them one after the other to give a full account of what all of these biblical scriptures are asserting as, what happened on each of those days of creation. And when you investigate the Genesis timeline according to all this information, it really brings out a lot of interesting detail, to say the least, and it most certainly affirms the firmament as being a solid structure that was established, spread out over the circle of the earth.
I know when I heard in Job, when it talks about the firmament, I was pretty convinced of that myself. I have not, when I read Book of Enoch and I read Jubilee, or read all those books, I kind of skipped over that part, to be quite honest with you, because I had no idea what it was talking about. I didn't have any idea that there was the idea of flat Earth was even an idea. For two, I had no idea how that would work on a globe. When I look at a globe, there's no way what's described there would even remotely sound like anything that's possible, from what we see. And so, it's so interesting that this research is starting to come out and to really just make headway, because we've got a guy, we've got a guy that comes on NYSTV. Everybody knows Douglas Hamp. He doesn't believe the Bible says that the world is flat. He doesn't believe that. He believes in a different interpretation. Obviously, there's people like Michael Heiser that believe the Earth is flat, or the Bible says the Earth is flat, but do not believe that the Earth is flat. So I think that it's important for us to take the Bible literally, and we've been pounding that into our audience and to ourselves for a long time now, founding to take the Bible literally. And so when I see these verses that describe to me what seems like a flat Earth, and I'm not, obviously not completely flat, but a domed, encircled Earth, I have no choice but to either believe what the Bible says about the Earth or believe what science says about the Earth. I have a choice, actually. I have a choice to believe what the Bible says about the Earth or what science says about the Earth. I have not heard once a convincing argument at all, and trust me, I've tried to listen to one or find one, because I don't like to tell people I believe the earth is flat. I mean, listen,
Right.
unfortunately, that's the truth. I don't like to tell people that, but I haven't heard one convincing argument that tells me that the Bible describes this earth as flat and hurling through space, spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, uh, moving at 10,000 miles an hour around the sun. I've never seen anything like that. In fact, it says it stays in its place, and all that. So, I mean, it's really hard for me not to believe it. And I've never, and I'm not paranoid. I know I've heard people say that people that believe that the world is flat are paranoid, extremely paranoid. And I don't see how that's possible. I think that the people that believe it are people that believe what the Scripture says about it. And then there's other people that don't even believe in Scripture that believe it as well. And, I think the people that are believing it on the Word of God are, there's nothing paranoid about it. We just choose to trust the Word of God over man, the Word of man. The Bible says, "Let the Word of God be true, let every man be a liar." So,
Exactly.
I don't want to keep on harping on that subject because I wouldn't say I'm a flat earther. I would say that I believe what the Bible says about the earth. If somebody were to convince me that the Bible does not say it's a flat earth, then I would believe it's not a flat earth. But everything I can see and everything that I've researched on it and I've heard people talk about, I cannot say that the Bible says we're living on a globe. Just can't do it. But you've done even further research, not just the Bible. You've looked into several ancient texts. They all line up, and that's what the show is going to be about. It. And for people that don't know, and Zen's mic is a little muffled. I heard some people in the chat saying it's a little muffled. He's on his backup computer right now, and so hopefully bear with us. I'm going to turn his mic up, and hopefully you guys will be able to hear it well. So he's going to be talking about it. But yeah, so interesting concept, Zen. I'm going to let you roll for a little bit and explain yourself because I think it's important that people understand where you're coming from with this whole thing. First off, most of our audience, I think, has probably heard you. I think that you've been on here at least enough times that most of the people that are listening have heard you. If they haven't, please kind of give a little description on who you are, what your website is, and then just get into the subject because I want to get into this. I know we don't. We could talk about this for 10 hours. I want to go 2 hours tonight. I don't want to go any more than that. Not that I don't want to, but I have to get up tomorrow. I got to pack. I'm going to that Green Man Festival, Little Green Men Festival in Hopkinsville tomorrow to videotape and see what the story is behind this visitation that happened in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And so I got to pack and get my kids' stuff packed and all that stuff. So I want to keep it at 2 hours, but we will have you on again for it. But I want to go ahead and let you do it. I'm sorry I'm rambling, taking up all the time, but go ahead.
No, you're good. And just so everybody knows, I do absolutely apologize for the sound quality. I know it's a little muffled. I'm on a backup machine. After I published this book, this newest one, the Firmament Vaulted Dome of the Earth, and then the show that I did with Rob, immediately after that show, before my Saturday show when I was going to follow up, my computer got corrupted somehow, and it's a stellar machine, and I make sure to never download anything or to to install anything that is unnecessary, and I do backups and everything, recovery, and it got just completely corrupted. And so I know that this backup laptop is not as superior in with the sound as my other one, and so for that I apologize. And please do bear with us because the information is pertinent, very relevant, and I think that this book that I just released, which is a follow-up to the Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch. It's my 10th book, and that the Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch was my 9th book, and these two build upon one another. And it was in looking at it, because I do study all of the extra biblical material and look at like for instance the Targums and all of the books of Enoch and Jasher and Jubilees and all the many other texts that most people don't read. In studying all of that, it wasn't until I applied the flat earth as model for world to the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, which is the portion of the Book of Enoch which describes the motions of the sun and the moon. It wasn't until I revisited that text with my newfound knowledge and with the flat earth as revelation that I was able to then decrypt all of the passages and all of those chapters of that book, and so I released that in 2015. And that book took me 6 months to write. But ever since then, I've also been investigating the firmament and the first 4 days of creation. And because the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries doesn't speak in great detail, even though it does mention the firmament, it doesn't elaborate on it in any great way. And in doing the research for that particular book, the Flat Earth book, there were several passages and reference which I discovered which I could apply to the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, but I had so much other material on the firmament, and that's when I decided to create a companion book for that particular book, and I've been working on that now for a year. And this newest book that I just published is 456 pages and contains just an incredible amount of information. I think most certainly the most elaborate account of um, all the information that you can find anywhere about the firmament. And I'm still discovering, and I had to actually split off 8 chapters of that book for an entirely different book, which will be called the Paradise and the Sides of the North, where I speak of the Mount of the Congregation and the Isaiah 14, where Lucifer declares how he wants to exalt himself and be like the Most High, and establishing his throne above that of the Most High God. And so that's still a lot of more information that will come to light, but I could not add any more to this particular book, because I know that people are afraid of books that are thick, and whenever you get a little bit beyond 300 pages, it's intimidating, and it's very challenging for, especially because this generation doesn't read. Most watch videos and listen to other people's work, but they don't study the scriptures. They don't read the Bible or the extra biblical or the this other material for themselves. And so, having a great interest in all of that, in examining again all the flat Earth material, I discovered all of this firmament information about the firmament, and so I compiled it into the 25 chapters of this book. And I looked very closely at the Genesis narrative and studied that, because I opened the book with a declaration of how I no longer believe in the heliocentric worldview as expounded by NASA and the scientific worldview, and scientists, astrophysicists, and basically call them the neoteric priests of Baal, because that's exactly what they are. And I speak about how there has been this ongoing debate, and how because books like Terra Firma, Sammy Robotham's The Zetetic Astronomy, and William Carpenter's 100 Proofs That the Earth is Not a Globe, that in those particular books they speak about this debate, and how there has been this ongoing discussion since the 1800s about the shape of the Earth. And the reason being is because the evidence, these different heliocentrists that were trying to detect and determine what the rate and the velocity of the Earth was in its orbital and axial motion, spinning once daily as it annually orbits around the sun. In doing these scientific experiments, they detected that the Earth was in fact not moving. And so this is the real science behind um, a geocentric Earth. And whether you believe that the Earth is flat or round or concave or convex, whatever it is most certainly affirmed that it is not in any way moving. And so that forces us to reassess, to reevaluate, and to redetermine where we are, who we are, and as far as our connections to creator and creation. And so in also realizing, like the Apollo 11 missions, that they were basically hoaxing the public by trying to utilize the window of the lunar module to depict the Earth as being in a spherical shape. And then the lack of the evidence, especially in this day and age when we have all these supposed 20,000 satellites up there, and all these different angles, which and then we only have a few pictures of the Earth and as a globe, and then the lack of there even being multiple websites where we could go and watch live streams of the Earth supposedly from space and see it in all of its glory. And so the lack of that evidence, and then NASA being busted hoaxing, and even talking about in its Orion, in its new missions, the talking about its attempts to create manned missions to Mars, and their discussions about how in such a journey they would have to get out and beyond the Van Allen radiation belts, and that they would have to protect the astronauts from being affected, basically killed by the radiation. And they talk about how they're not able to achieve um, and to be able to accomplish such feat even in this day and age, and yet they supposedly during the Apollo 11 missions succeeded in doing this multiple times, and at a time when the computer technology was not even as equivalent to that as we see in everybody's cell phones. I mean, the technology was very primitive, and in looking back at all of that, their supposed accomplishments, they, in their own words, verify that they were never able to actually accomplish and to succeed in journeying to the moon and back. And then the Apollo 11, something something funny happened on the way to the moon that verifies that they, in fact, were trying to hoax us. And so I re-examine and look at the biblical narrative on Genesis, the first 4 days of creation, and then again I apply all of these other accounts to that same narrative. And in doing so, you get so much more information as to what the timeline, how it plays out, and each one of the days, the exact description of what was going on with the first day, the earth. Specifically, the first 3 chapters of this book are about the earth, how it was and became null and void, or without form and void. And I speak about how when you look at investigate those particular chapters, it seems clear to me that the Most High did not create the earth in imperfect form, but that something had to have happened for it to become and to take on a shape where it was basically a deserted wasteland, or what is cited in the biblical text as, or Strong's Concordance as, an indistinguishable ruin. And so something occurred, and then so I go into the whole thing about the war in heaven, and how that led to the earth becoming in this shape. And then I also affirm with the multiple biblical translations, as well as the multiple commentaries, which for those that are interested in doing this investigation, you can easily research such things on BibleHub.com. It really makes it easy to do a comparative study of all these multiple biblical translations, as well as all of the commentaries. But and the reason I open and begin with that, because it's my opinion that the rebel angels being cast out of the heavens previous to the creation of man, and in Second Enoch it speaks about them as being cast out on the second day. And it's interesting to me that on the second day is when the firmament is established as well as a solid structure. And so I speculate in the opening chapters of this book that the firmament was created um, as as part of what is the reconstruction and the recreation of the earth, and it's my opinion that it was done so in order to prevent the rebel angels from being able to escape the judgment that has been pronounced upon them. Because we have in the modern age of humanity these 6,000 years, and then the millennial reign, of course, will come. But that just as a legion, when they were confronted by Yeshua and they recognized him as the Son of God, they asked him, "Have you come to torment us before the time?" And so they know that they have a certain amount of time to accomplish the New World Order as feat to basically introduce the Antichrist, Satan, as being like the Most High, to hand over this one world system over to the Antichrist and allow him to rule for the last 3.5 years of tribulation. And so that is all written into Scripture and prophetic as far as the end of days, and with our being the fig tree generation. And so I talk about all these things in order to set up the premise of what I go into in the latter chapters, which is basically a very in-depth and profound look, investigation on what the shape, structure, form, and characteristics of the firmament actually are, and how it most certainly it is affirmed in the scriptures as being a solid structure which was fitted to and encapsulates the circle of the earth as described in Isaiah 40, verse 22, as the enclosed world system being in the shape of a tent or a tabernacle.
Wow, very interesting. So, out of all the different books that you read and compiled evidence for this vaulted dome, did anything not line up together, or was everything pretty much lined up exactly how you thought it would, or was there contradictions in the way certain things lined up? I mean, I know that I heard the interview you did with Rob, and I wanted, I was interested in that. I wondered if anything didn't line up exactly, like the way the sun moved. I mean, we talked about that in the last show that you did, the way it went through gates, and you're talking now that it moves north to south, and obviously, you talked a little bit about that. What was there anything that just contradicted each other as your research began?
No, not really. Not in the books that I studied and all the material that I compiled together. It basically affirmed the biblical narrative. And in my mind, because, we basically embrace a heliocentric worldview, and as modern humanity, at least for the last 500 years, we've been indoctrinated into this Darwinian heliocentric worldview where we believe that the Earth is one of 9 planets which is orbiting in motion around that of the Sun, and that the Sun is the central mass of the supposed solar system, and that it's the preeminent body which basically through gravitational attraction holds in place all of these other planets. And no, actually, when you study all of this other material, it affirms the exactly what Genesis is speaking about. And in my mind, it shows that they had to have been also inspired by the Most High God for them to contain information which affirms the whole premise of the enclosed world system, because this is knowledge which has been lost, forbidden, and and basically excluded from the collective consciousness of the world for the last 500 years. But the fact that all of this material has encoded this knowledge within it, in my mind, shows that the prophets or the people that had written the material, that they were most certainly inspired by the Holy Spirit in order to to have this truth encoded within it. And so that's also why it is that I spend so much time studying this extra biblical material, because such knowledge can be gleaned from it by those that are open to entertaining such possibility.
It's interesting to say the least. I can tell you this, that I never would have thought I saw the day that people were even remotely considering this idea. Um, but the fact that there's so many things that line up perfectly with this idea, it makes sense. I mean, it makes so much sense, and it makes so much sense why they would suppress this knowledge, why they would discount these books from the Bible, because the Bible does give a pretty good explanation for it if you're actually looking for an explanation of what the world looks like. But most people have been conditioned to take the explanation that they've learned in school, they've learned from their parents, they've learned from where they've been conditioned to take the knowledge of that, which is interesting because we don't take the knowledge of science from the evolution standpoint, as most believers don't. We don't take the knowledge of where we came from as humans, how old the Earth is. But when it comes to the shape and the size of the Earth, that's like, it's like so taboo. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they established the idea that the Earth was a globe such a long time before Charles Darwin came along. This has been way before Charles Darwin even come along, that they established the shape of the world. Okay, so obviously now we're looking at the idea of, we've heard, and said this before, but there's a popular scientist slash educator that's saying that it's child abuse to teach your children that the Earth is a 6,000-year-old. So there's not much time, before that becomes the idea of what the Scripture says, and people are going to start basing their ideas off science on that as well. This is interesting that it's coming back up in this time. I mean, it talks about knowledge coming forth. It talks about the increase in knowledge, sealing up the books sealing up the scroll until the end time, when men will run to and fro and knowledge shall be increased. Do you think that has anything to do with this knowledge here? I mean, the idea of the flat Earth?
Oh, most certainly. And the reason being is because the Darwinian heliocentric worldview has established that first we've evolved from monkeys, and that there are multiple Earths out there, and that the universe is ever expanding, and that all of the heavenly luminaries, all of these pinpoints of light out there in the night sky, that each one of these is sunlight, and that each one of them could possibly have a planetary system encompassing around them, and that as if one of these planets happens to be in the magical Goldilocks zone, that they could also have evolved life in the similitude as is seen and all around us. And so science is affirming that there are all these Earth-like worlds out there and all these sun-like star systems out there, and that the Earth is just another one of these random, uh, just happenings, perchance happenings, that the universe just evolved life in the way that we see it here, and that it is evolving life in multiple aspects all over this so-called ever-expanding universe. And so it makes the universe seem just so massive and so large, which also affirms the principle that there are more places for the Most High to focus on in keeping, in managing, and overseeing His creation. And so it makes it less personal as far as our relationship with the Creator and with the creation.
Oh
And
yeah,
it
there's
has,
no doubt. There's a sense of insecurity when you feel like you're just a speck in a
yeah,
vast universe. It'd be like me throwing a piece of dust into the ocean, and you just have this. There's nothing personal about that, and to think, because it does line up with evolution. That's the only way evolution could even work, is that idea, because you think about it, you're a speck hurling through space. I mean, there's nothing there. There's nothing personal about that. It's the whole. It's they have to have that in order to affirm their evolution belief. Gnostic, I guess, education on who we are, who we come from, that we can be like gods, we can evolve into these godlike beings because people have done it already. You know, especially the idea of the ancient alien theory. We
Yes.
we can evolve into a being like that one day. You know, and now we're trying to force this evolution according to. And I think you're right. I think that's why they've suppressed it, because if you believe that you are in the center of the universe, you are what it is. This is it. This is what we are. And God's literally, and you talked about in your book that I thought was super interesting. You talked about where the throne of Yahweh is. Talk a little bit about that, man, because that was just amazing. That was such an amazing revelation and such an amazing research you did on that, man. It really just kind of turned something over in me when I heard about it. So
Oh, yeah, this is a huge revelation, and this is part of the journey of discovery for me in studying all of this material. But basically, what I discovered in examining all of the different prophets' accounts of being taken up through the various levels of heaven, whether they give a description of being taken up through the three heavens or the seven heavens or the 10 heavens, it's always that at the very highest height, at the very top, above what is the vaulted dome, like in Exodus 24:10, Moses describes it as a paved work, like created of sapphire, and then he speaks of seeing the God of Israel sitting on his throne, and his throne sitting on this paved work. And then in Revelation 4, John, in Revelation 4 and Revelation 15, he also speaks of seeing Yahweh Elohim seated on his throne, and then underneath the throne is a sea of glass like unto crystal. Ezekiel, he gives a description of the firmament being established above the heads of the cherubim. He also sees the fiery presence of the Most High God seated on his throne. In Enoch chapter 14, you also see repeated this same phenomenon, the same kind of symbology. And so, in examining the the visions of all of these prophets in relaying their either being taken up and brought before the presence of the Most High, or in seeing him in vision like Moses, or in Zechariah chapter 6, he also describes seeing the God of Israel seated on his throne. But in each one of these accounts, you see these very cryptic references to a sea of glass like a crystal, or a paved work of sapphire, or something of that nature. And once you understand what they are describing about, that the Most High has in fact um, established what Lucifer says when he wants to exalt himself above the throne of God. He says, I will establish myself above the stars of God, above the clouds of God, and um, above the mount of the congregation in these sides of the north. And I show in this particular book that the sides of the north are, in fact, where the center of the earth plane is, where the North Pole is, and that where you see Polaris, that is the center of the celestial firmament. And then all of the stars moving in circle, and the sun and the moon and all the celestial luminaries moving in circle around Polaris, it shows that Polaris is the very center of the celestial firmament. And so God has, in fact, established his heavenly temple and his throne directly above Polaris on the top of the vaulted dome of the earth. And so the vaulted dome of the earth is not only ceiling for our enclosed world system, but it is also the floor of what is the heavenly temple and the throne of the Most High God. That is the paved work that is referenced by Moses. It is the sea of glass like unto crystal, which is referenced by many of the other prophets, John including Enoch, Ezekiel, Zechariah, all of them are speaking about the same thing. And so when you come to understanding about that, it makes sense as to what Isaiah is describing with God seated on the circle of the earth, the firmament, the vaulted dome of the earth, as it's referenced in Amos 9:6. Um, and that is exactly just right beyond the reach of the stars, above the clouds, and right past the celestial night. That's where God is seated, and we are the only show in town. There are no other Earth-like bodies or scenarios happening in the universal creation. All of those stars, the wandering stars, the so-called planets, they're all celestial luminaries. They're lights. And I give account of the many passages which reference how the luminaries were created of water and fire and air. And there's no physicality, no physical composition to them, which is Earth-like, that that they could be uh, as a place of inhabitation, which was the earth was created special for the inhabitation of humanity and the creatures which were created for dwelling upon it. But all of these other luminaries are not earth-like in any way, and so we are the narrow focus of the Most High God, and He sits on the center of the vaulted dome of the earth, because that is the strategic vantage point from which he can see all things, and he is witness to everything that is occurring here upon the earth, and they are narrowly focused because we are the bride and we are the prodigal child. And so he's not occupied, as science would have us believe, by all of these other worlds and all of these other earths and all of these other happenings, but he is focused completely on what is going on here on the earth, and he is um, basically guiding and directing all of the happenings to his own prophetic end.
You know, John, something comes to mind. Are you still there, bro? You know,
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
we had talked a while back ago about, an experience that you had, and as Zen's talking there, it reminded me, you know, of something you had shared. I don't know if you'd want to share it, but it was of a dream or a vision that you had, that it was like, I mean, it was like real to you, and maybe you can talk about that a little bit, because it just reminds me of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give a short synopsis. I've told you guys about it before. I think it's been a while back, but I think we were talking about, I don't even remember whose show we were talking about it, but I don't know if I was asleep or awake. It's hard to tell sometimes, but I definitely wrote it down after the fact. But I was laying in bed, and basically, kind of in an instant, I was brought up above the earth, okay? And I never really thought about this, but the earth looked, it wasn't a globe, I could see this whole entire flatland, but I was seeing these hermaphrodite beings that this angel was showing me. They looked like they were dressed like priests, and I'll tell you why I knew they were hermaphrodites. But they were walking around signing contracts with people. They looked like if you guys ever seen the Raid commercial, Raid, like those little cockroach looking things. They were real kind of big, round looking beings that were crazy looking. And I asked, I looked at this angel that looked, I mean, just crazy. This angel was massive and scary looking, but he brought me down to one of these things and picked up this huge thing by the leg and showed, and this is kind of graphic, so if you got a kid watching, but anyways, it was a hermaphrodite, let's put it that way, okay, this thing, and he dropped it down and it scurried off real quick. And I never knew what the dream meant, and I never really, I still think it has to do with people changing their DNA or changing their sex, or Catholic priests marrying, pastors marrying homosexuals. What I don't know exactly what it has to do with, but what stood out to me was the idea that I see this huge flatland. I don't see a globe. I don't see anything like that. I see this huge flatland, and I can see points moving from A to B. I could see like it's almost like it was mapping it out. I saw all these beings out there signing these contracts, and I know this it doesn't have much to do with the show, but the idea that I saw this, and I've only had a few dreams, but I've written a lot of them down that I feel like were interesting. And this one, I don't know if it was a dream or open vision or what it was. Haven't had anything like this in a while, but I mean, I used to have stuff like this happen a lot. But anyways, I thought it was interesting to note that, because I'm wondering how many people have seen visions of like the world, what they've seen them as, because you don't think about that kind of thing like when you're seeing it until something like this is brought up. So interesting to note anyway.
Yeah, that's very interesting because many of the prophets, they were also given witnessed and vision in this capacity. And it's my opinion that Enoch, in writing the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, and I speak about this in that book that I wrote, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch. It's my opinion he was taken to where Polaris was in order to look down upon the circle of the earth, because as I show in and even in the last show that we did on that particular book, I talk about how he speaks about the motions of the sun and the moon from east to west and then back to north and then to the east, which is basically describing all of those movements as a circle, and that you can only unlock such motion when you apply it to, for instance, the shape of the earth as is depicted on the United Nations flag as the azimuth equidistant projection map. And that when you do so, and as I broke down in the last show that we did about the six gates of heaven and how they are laid out from the Tropic of Capricorn to the Tropic of Cancer, and that the sun moves back and forth from the two tropics back and forth twice over the course of the year, and that it will spend 30 days moving through each one of these gates as it moves towards the equator and then towards the top of the Tropic of Cancer, and how each portion, each of the seasons, is also aligned and situated according to such orientation and to such movement. And as I revealed in the show that I did with Rob Skiba just 2 weeks ago, I found another passage in the book of Ecclesiastes, which, if you read the King James version of Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 5, and then verse 6, in verse 6, it attributes this north-south motion to that of the wind. Whereas in the Targums, if you reference and read, it attributes that motion to the sun. And so if you understand the motions that are being described, and I can actually read this for y'all if you want to.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, I'll pull it up here in just a second, but let me explain this first. And so when you understand what he's describing, Solomon describes, he affirms exactly what Enoch lays out in, verbatim in the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. And so the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verse 5 and 6, is affirmation. Confirmation is another witness to what Enoch describes in that particular book. And so let me pull up this chapter. And then I'll also, but before we do, let me just read this one passage really quick, which is talking about, how the Most High is centered above the amount of the congregation on the sides of the north when I came to this understanding. It says this: if one considers the shape of the earth as a circle with dome encapsulated above it, it would most certainly make sense that the Creator, as grand architect of this world, would anchor the throne which he sits upon when supervising kingdom directly upon the central heights of the vaulted dome of the earth. For what other place would grant him better vantage point for observing in oversight the fullness of his creation? As place where the vaulted arch rises in full extension, being the exact point where the firmament comes together, this zenith represents the highest point of elevation in all the world. As such, would not the north represent the absolute perfect place for the Most High God to have designated such locale his own in establishing heavenly kingdom? Why wouldn't the Most High select the central heights of the firmament as spot for establishing the heavenly temple as his place of residence? From a tactical point of reference, there is no better focal point than the sides of the north for placement of such a strategic overlook. I'm going to read one other thing really quick, which talks about this, and this is from a book called the Chronicles of Jeremiah. It says this: the boundaries of the heavens touch the waters of the ocean, for the waters of the ocean flow round the extremities of the heavens and the earth, and the extremities of the heaven are spread upon the waters of the ocean. As it is said, who layeth the foundations of his upper chambers in the waters? And so that particular passage is talking about the firmaments being established on the waters. And so basically where the firmament reaches and joins in union with the Antarctic ice wall and creating the walls of the dome structure. And then it says this: the heavens rise to an immense height in the form of a tent that is spread out, and mortals stand beneath it. Its extremities is below, and its center is above. This is the form of the heavens. Their extremity is below, and their center above, so that all God's creatures, as it were, sit beneath it as in a tent, as if it is said, he spread them out as a tent for dwelling therein. And so that it basically affirms exactly what I talked about in the previous portion that I read from, and it confirms exactly what Isaiah is speaking about in chapter 40, verse 22, when he speaks of the Most High sitting upon the circle of the earth, and how the heavens spread above the circle of the earth form form in the enclosed world system. It forms in the shape of a tabernacle or a tent, where the circle of the earth is the floor of the tent or tabernacle, and then the firmament are the walls and the roof spread out above it.
Wow, that's amazing. So interesting, man. I got to read this stuff too for myself. I need to get into the. I know you've done a lot of the research for me, and I'm glad for that, because I haven't had time to read or research as much as I'm working on research for a book that me and David Carrico are doing, and I haven't had time to read into that stuff. But I'm so glad you did the research for this stuff, because, dude, next time I read this stuff, I'll have my eyes open for this, and I'll be able to actually understand those parts that I had no clue about before. So, I guess one other thing I want to talk to you about that I thought was really interesting. You talked about the movements of the sun. You talked about how you had kind of a firm grasp on it now, a little bit more than you had before, because you've researched what the other books said. It's kind of like they all kind of add on to each other. Can you talk a little bit about that, about the gates they go through, and you have a model, from what I understand, that shows this, and I think you had it on last time, but can you screen share that? Is that possible? Or you send me a link and I can screen share it while you're talking about it?
Yeah. Well, actually, I can't, because all that information is on my other computer.
Well, do you have it up on YouTube?
Yeah, I can send you a link to it. And actually, Rob, if you go to his YouTube, he separated in a very short segment. I think it's like 8 minutes long, where I discuss that specific thing. And people can play that video, or you can just play it
You
and
want
then
me to
pause it.
play it real quick and let him.
Oh yeah, that would be perfect,
Yeah,
and that
that way
would give me time to pull up this information so I can explain it,
okay.
expound upon it.
Okay, is it the one? Let me see here. It's definitely not the one that's an hour long here. Is it? I think it's this one. It's 15 minutes. Or am I
Yeah, I
looking
believe
for?
so. Where it's an excerpt from the show that we did where I talk about the movements of the sun.
Okay, I will play this. Then I'm gonna play it, and then that will give you time to get your stuff up here. So
Excellent.
let me
Thanks,
get it
brother.
going here. Yeah, no problem. Let me get this pulled open and get it going. Get past this ad here. But yeah, man, this is really cool. This is right up my alley, man. I'm into this. I'll go ahead and pull this up, guys. Bear with me here. My computer is not running slow, but it's definitely not running as fast as it should, considering how much I pay for internet. So here we go. Entire screen. Share. There we go. Can you guys see that now? Hold on, let me get it pulled up here.
By way too fast. Dude, I'm going to have you come on for. So I'm talking with my guest, Zen Garcia. We're talking about his new book, The Firmament, Vaulted Dome of the Earth. And man, time's just flying by way too fast. Dude, I'm going to have you come on for a second show because I know we're barely scratching the surface of this topic.
Right, barely. Yeah.
I mean, you feel like an outline, and we barely even touched hardly any of it.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, right before the break, you were talking about the celestial bodies. So go ahead and continue where you left off there.
All right. What I'm about to go into now connects what we're talking about with the heavenly circle in heaven with the movement that I will go into that of my decrypting the Book of Enoch's the motion of the sun and the moon in a circular fashion over the earth as if it's laid out as a clock's face. But one passage before, which again affirms that the luminaries are completely different from the earth and that there's no other in our universe earth-like planets or objects or bodies that have actual terraform which can be inhabited, that these stars, the celestial stars that we see, all of the planets, the wandering stars, they're all luminaries, and they're described as such in the books of Enoch. It says this: on the fourth day God made the luminaries, sun, moon, and stars of three substances, air, light, and fire. He took aerial material and prepared vessels like lamps, and mixed fire with light and filled them. And because in the nature of fire there was no light, nor heat in that of light, the fire imparted heat to the light, and the light gave luminosity to the fire. And from these two were the luminaries, sun, moon, and stars fabricated. Now, this has to do with the movement, the motions, which those that try to understand what I'm about to go into by applying these motions to the globe Earth, they won't make any sense. It says this: the path of the luminaries is beneath the firmament, and they are not fixed as men have foolishly stated, but the angels guide them. Mar Isaac says, the sun performs his course from the east to the west and goes behind the lofty northern mountains the whole night until he rises in the east. This is from the Book of the Bee. So remember this motion. From the east, that's where the sun rises, it goes to the west where the sun sets, and then back towards the north. Well, how does that work if you're on a globe and the earth spinning is what causes the sun, which is in the very center of the so-called solar system, that it's the earth spinning which causes it to set and to rise? How does it go from east to west and then back to the north? Doesn't make sense. And a few more passages and then I'll explain this. This is from the book of the Secrets of Enoch, chapter 24, verse 4. For before all things were visible, I alone used to go about in the invisible things, like the sun, from east to west, and then from west to east. Now remember that too. East to west, and then back from west to east. Now, he's describing a circle, and I'll prove this. Next passage from the Book of Enoch. And this was the verse in the Book of Enoch that just I could not make any sense of. And it's because I was applying it to the heliocentric worldview. But when I applied this motion to, again, to a flat earth, a flat circular plane, as if you're looking down from above, then it made sense. It says this: the sun sets in heaven, and returning by the north to proceed towards the east is conducted so as to enter by that gate and illuminate the face of heaven. That's the Book of Enoch, chapter 71, verse 8. There's another passage in the Book of Enoch, chapter 77, verse 4, that says this, and it applies it to both the sun and the moon. In the orb of the sun there is a seventh portion of light, which is added to it from the moon. By measure it is put in until the seventh portion of the light of the sun is departed. They set, enter into the western gate, circuit by the north, and through the eastern gate go forth over the face of heaven, which you were talking about, the face of heaven. It also describes it many times, the face of the earth. Now this is the big one that explains completely all of these motions. And you have to remember that what they are describing here is a circle, the sun moving from the east to the west and then back to the north and to the east in a circle, which is, how it moves in revolution around the North Pole as the center of the earth plane. This is from first I'm going to read the King James Version of Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 5 through 7, and then the Targum version, which explains it in greater detail. It says this: the sun also arises, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to his place where he arose. The wind, verse 6, the wind goeth toward the south, and turneth about unto the north. It whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again according to his circuits. Now, in the Targums, what is different is that in verse 6, whereas it attributes the motion, the south and northward motion, to the wind, it actually in the Targum attributes this to the sun. And I'll explain why after I read the passage. It says this from the Targums, Ecclesiastes chapter 1. The sun rises by day from the east side, and the sun sets on the west side at night, and it glides into its place going by the path of the deep, and it rises the next day from the place where it rose there yesterday. It goes along the whole south side by day, and returns to the north side by the path of the deep. Round and round it goes to the wind of the northern side at the period of Nisan and Tammuz, which are the vernal equinox and the summer solstice. And on its circuit it returns to the wind of the southern side at the period of Tishri and Tibet, which are the autumnal equinox and the winter solstice. It goes out from the eastern lattices at dawn and enters through the western lattices in the evening. Okay, so what Solomon actually is describing here is exactly what Enoch described as the motion of the sun and moon through the six gates of heaven. And as I explained in the show that we did previously, the six gates of heaven are broken down in, you have to subdivide the space, the expanse between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. That there are three gates below the equator, which connect the Tropic of Capricorn with the equator. Those are the first 3 gates. The first gate is directly above the Tropic of Capricorn. The second gate is in the middle between the Tropic of Capricorn and the equator. And the third gate above the Tropic of Capricorn actually touches the equator. And then the next 3 gates are the 4th, 5th, and 6th gate. The 4th gate is directly above the equator, moving towards the Tropic of Cancer. The 5th gate is the area in the exact center between the equator and the Tropic of Cancer. And then the 6th gate is the one that touches the Tropic of Cancer. And so what Solomon is describing here is the movement of the sun as it moves towards the north. And in the Book of Enoch, and I explained this in great detail in the portion of the book on the tabernacle of the sun, Enoch describes the motion of the sun beginning on the vernal equinox when it's located right above the equator. And then it moves north. For 90 days, 91 days, it moves north until it reaches the Tropic of Cancer. And the reason he does so is because God's calendar, according to the ancient Hebrew lunar calendar, the seasons begin with spring. And spring begins when the sun is exactly on the equator. The vernal equinox begins the season of spring. For 91 days, it moves towards the Tropic of Cancer. When it gets to the Tropic of Cancer for the summer solstice, that begins summer. And then it reverses course and starts to move south, which is what Solomon says. He says, round and round it goes to the wind of the northern side. That's it moving towards the north. In the period of Nisan and Tammuz, the vernal equinox occurs in the Hebrew month of Nisan. The summer solstice occurs in the Hebrew month of Tammuz. And then after it reaches the Tropic of Cancer, it reverses course, and then he says, and on its circuit it returns to the wind of the southern side at the period of Tishri and Tibet. So Tishri, that's when the autumnal equinox happens. And when the sun reaches the Tropic of Cancer, it reverses course. It begins moving for 90 days towards the towards the equator. On the 91st day, it will reach the equator for the autumnal equinox, and then it moves into the southern latitudes, into the what I call the southern hemisphere plane. And then for the next 90 days, it will move from the equator to the Tropic of Capricorn. It will reach the Tropic of Capricorn in the Hebrew month Tibet, which is when the winter solstice occurs. And then it will reverse course on that 91st day. It will reverse course, and then for the next 90 days, move back towards the equator. And then when reaching the equator, also the winter solstice begins the season of winter, and the autumn, when it reaches the autumnal equinox, that actually begins the season of fall. And so when it reaches the equator again, then that ends the year and it begins a whole new season. And this is exactly what Enoch describes for the motions of the sun through the 6 gates of heaven, as I explain in great detail in that book and the video that I did explaining how to apply the flat earth as key to decrypt the Book of Enoch, the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries.
Dude, my mind is like exploding over here, because as you're talking, I pulled up the video that I made back on, when did I post this? August 7th. Oh, wow. Almost exactly a year ago. August 7th, 2015, I did the animation, How the Four Seasons Work on the Flat Earth Model.
Yes, exactly.
That was based off of, interestingly enough, spinning heliocentric ball Earth software,
right?
Stellarium, by simply changing the camera settings and setting my location to Antarctica. And when I did that, I got sort of this, upward view, and then I just flipped it to, horizontally so that to have a downward view. And as you were talking, I'm watching this animation go around, and that finally made sense to me now, because I had read some of those passages, and I'm like, I understand it going east to west, but I didn't understand it going north to south until I watched this animation while you were describing that.
Yes.
And, for those of you guys listening to this, you could go to my YouTube channel and just search for how the 4 seasons work on the flat Earth model, and then rewind this archive that we're talking about right now. Listen to Zen say what he just said while watching that animation. And, wow, I mean, okay, so because what the animation shows is not only is the sun and moon going around in a circle over the circle of the Earth, but it's tightening its circle.
Right.
And it's expanding its circle. So in essence, it's turning toward the north to tighten, and then at certain times of the year, it's turning toward the south to expand. And it not only does it contract and expand, but it also slows down and speeds up.
Yes, exactly.
Which is extraordinary. And I don't know if because I'm a visual person, I don't know if I would have got that just listening to you.
I'm glad you pulled that up. And when I actually create the video, if you don't mind, I will post that into it so that people can understand. Because these passages, the knowledge of these teachings, have been lost, as we said, for at least the last half millennia, and people were not able to understand them. And it's because we've been indoctrinated into the heliocentric worldview, which is a false doctrine. And the fact that all of this information has been encoded into not just the Bible, but all of these extra biblical texts, in my mind, affirms them as being divinely inspired, because they verify the veracity and the authenticity of the biblical account, the Genesis narrative, as given to Moses by the Most High God. And, you can take it exactly for what it is. You don't have to accommodate. You don't have to try to mold it and make it fit our preconceived notions as far as the heliocentric worldview.
All right, so there you guys have it. That's very interesting. I know that I'm trying to stop the screen share here.
Read the first portion.
I gotta. There we go. There we go. Yeah, sorry about that. I should have turned the I guess the volume off of the chat. I know you guys were hearing popping the entire time on there, but yeah, that was interesting, man. I'm glad he did that, showed that graphic, because it really brought out what you were saying there, and that's really awesome. Did you have time to check out what you're looking for?
Yeah, actually, I'm not going to repeat all that was in that particular portion of the video, because it's basically self-explanatory in what we just went over. But I will share one other thing in reference to this, and that was in going to the Bible Hub and looking up Ecclesiastes 1 verse 6 to see if any of the other Bible translations attribute the motion that is described there to the sun. I did find in one of the commentaries in Gill's exposition of the entire Bible, he also speaks about this, and he, in studying the Targum, came to the same conclusion as me. And he also describes many other translators that also affirm the motion described in Ecclesiastes 1:6 and 1:5 and 1:6 to that of the sun, and that 1:6 is a continuation of the motion described in verse 1:5, which, as we showed in that particular video, is the exact thing that Enoch describes. And we went over this, and John was actually reading from the passages from the Book of Enoch when I was explaining this previously in the show that we did on the flat earth as key to decrypt the Book of Enoch. But he says this in his exposition on it. The wind goeth toward the south, and turneth about unto the north. The word wind is not in this clause in the original text, which is exactly what I just said, but is taken from the next, and so may be rendered, it goeth towards the south, that is the sun before mentioned, which as to its diurnal and nocturnal course in the daytime goes towards the south, and in the night towards the north. And as to its annual course, before the winter solstice, it goes to the south, and before the summer solstice, to the north, as interpreters observe. And the Targum not only interprets this clause, but even the whole verse of the sun, paraphrasing the whole thus. It goes all the side of the south in the daytime, and goes round to the side of the north in the night by the way of the abyss. It goes its circuit and comes to the wind of the south corner in the revolution of Nisan and Tammuz, and by its circuit it returns to the wind of the north corner in the revolution of Tishri and Tibet. It goes out of the confines of the east in the morning and goes into the confines of the west in the evening. And then he describes Jarchi, Aselch, and Titatzik. I guess these are the names of the interpreters. He says, they also interpret it of the sun. So does Mercius, Verenius, Jagerius. According to Mr. Boughton, it renders it, he walketh to the south, and then so he's basically saying that all these other interpreters also attribute that particular verse to the motions of the sun, which, again, when I discovered this and when I understood what it was talking about, it affirms exactly what Enoch describes in the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. And it becomes a confirming witness to such motion, which, again, is the only way to make sense of the material that is found for the motions of the sun and the moon in that portion of the Book of Enoch.
Wow, man, this is mind-blowing. And that's one of the main questions that people have, like, well, so where does the sun go if it sets? That's one of the main things that you see, and people just have no idea. But this is really, really cool, man. I think if you guys want to get their book, you have it very reasonably priced. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it off. I think you can get it off your webpage too, right? And like I think I saw it on like Lulu or something like that. I can't remember the name of the website, but
right.
And I think Barnes and Nobles as well, right?
All of them have it, and even people that live in different parts of the world, you can go to Amazon.com. Like I have listeners and people that have bought it in Denmark, in France, in Australia, in Holland, all over the world, and you can just order it through Amazon and get free shipping, which is amazing, because if you order it from me, even though I autograph it for free of charge, just shipping to Canada is like in excess $40 or $50, and shipping it to Denmark or Holland is like $90. I mean, it's insane. And so, you can go to the different Amazons in the different countries and order it for free, ship for free, and gain access to the book, because it is carried by all of these different Amazons all over the world, the Barnes and Nobles all over the world, Lulu.com, all of them. And so, yeah, I read those passages, Enoch 24:4. For before all things were visible, I alone used to go in the invisible things, like the sun moving from east to west and from west to east. A passage from the Book of the Bee where it says, the sun performs his course from the east to the west and goes behind the lofty northern mountains the whole night until he rises in the east. All of these passages are describing the motion of the sun and the moon as they move in a giant circle. And you can only explain such motion by applying it to the azimuthal equidistant projection map, as if you're looking down on the earth, as if the earth was a clock space. And this is why I believe, like in your vision, in your dream, Enoch also was taken up to where Polaris was, and then the angel Uriel, in him looking down on the circle of the earth, then explained to him all the motions of the sun and the moon through the six gates of heaven, as we as I depicted and as we shared in that video segment that you played. And so, in the previous show that we did, I was trying to explain it all with just a picture of the six gates, but actually seeing the moon, the sun move and circle, and then moving north and south as it transverses and transits between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, that totally helps you to visualize what, I was trying to basically get you to be able to imagine, but being able to actually see it, it simplifies it in the understanding.
Yeah, it's fantastic, man. This is mind blowing. I can tell you this right now. I mean, like, uh, just the fact that the Bible describes this stuff, or not just the Bible, but like these extra biblical books. Like, I believe the Book of Enoch is, I believe it's biblical personally. I know that, obviously my opinion matters that much, if any. But I do think that when I read the rest of it, of course, minus that part, because before I didn't understand that part, I can see it lining up with the rest of Scripture. I really vouch for the Book of Enoch, big time. And so, seeing that this stuff is in there, that this stuff, it's just amazing to me. And you know what? I'll never believe that the Earth is a globe unless I can go up into a spaceship and look down and see it as a globe. I just won't believe it myself. I know how easy it is for people to lie to you, and how easy it is to get away with a lie like this. I mean, we look at Germany; they did it to their people, caused them to kill millions of Jews because of their propaganda. So why would we think that they can't do it with the shape of the Earth? I mean, it only takes a couple generations to really just change the way people think. It doesn't take long at all.
Right.
William and John, you've been quiet. You guys got any questions for Zen? I know that there's plenty of audience questions that you've lined up, John, but William and John, before we do that, you guys have anything to ask them? Because, I mean, we're rounding up to about 40 minutes. We probably got 40 minutes of questions from the audience that we could ask. But if you guys have anything that you'd like to say, I would really appreciate it, because I know that William's been quiet, and I know he's super interested in flat Earth stuff, and so is John.
Well,
I've just been listening along.
I've listened to the last two interviews that Zen's done with Rob, and I was just absolutely, some of the research that he pulled out, I'd never heard before. I was looking forward to just listening to Zen, roll with it tonight. And most of the questions that are coming from the chat are actually questions, I'd like answered, or I would have asked in the first place. So hopefully, we'll get to all these questions, because man, they're piling up on him.
Well, let me explain one last thing before we go into the questions, but I'll be glad, of course, to answer as many. But just really quick, and I won't explain this in great detail as I did in the show that I did with Rob, but another passage that I found from the Book of the Secrets of Enoch, which is Enoch number 2. I just want to read this really quick, because this is absolutely mind-blowing, and this is something that people have been speculating on for a very long time. But
feel free to go into detail about it if you want. I'm not going to stop you. It's not a big deal. But I would advise people to go check out the 2-part deal you did with Rob Skiba too, because you went into a lot of detail on that, and it was awesome. So yeah, definitely go check it out. I think you can get it on Truth Frequency Radio as an archive, or you can go to Rob Skiba's channel. I think he uploaded both of them, so you can go check it out on there too.
And I want to honor the audience's questions, so I'll just try to be quick on this. But it says this, basically, just to explain it, Enoch speaks about the heavenly circle being separated into 7 segments, and the Sefer Yetzirah and several other books, they speak about the 7 planets of the universe as being Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn, and then the sun and the moon. All of those are included as these heavenly luminaries, these wandering stars. But anyways, it says this. On the first uppermost circle I placed the stars, Chrono, which is Cronus, Saturn, and on the second, Aphrodite, Venus. On the third, Aries, which is Mars. On the fifth, Zeus, which is Jupiter. On the sixth, Hermes, which is Mercury. On the seventh, Lesser, the moon, and adorned it with the lesser stars. And on the lower I placed the sun for the illumination of day, and the moon and stars for the illumination of night. All right, this is what I wrote about this passage. This passage from 2 Enoch is one of the more cryptic passages from the text, which as passage describes the planets and stars, grouping them together with the sun, moon, stars, and did you notice, lesser the moon? What in the world could Enoch be citing by this reference? Did he perhaps actually mean the lesser moon? And if so, is this the object which Samuel Burley Robotham wrote about in chapter 11 of his masterful work, Zetetic Astronomy, Earth Not a Globe, where he discusses the causes of solar and lunar eclipses? There he speculates upon the existence of some unnoticed, unknown dark companion to the moon, which as body, he postulates, could possibly be the object responsible for casting shadow upon and across its luminescent space during lunar eclipses. In that chapter, he also shares eyewitness record of the unfolding of certain lunar eclipses where both moon and sun remain positioned above the Earth's horizon, negating possibility that it was the shadow of the Earth which obstructed sight of the moon during such viewing, also negating it as the cause of such happening. I'm not going to read the whole passage from Samuel Burley Robotham, but I will read this one portion so we can get to the questions. It says this: from the facts and phenomena already advanced, we cannot draw any other conclusion than that the moon is obscured by some kind of semi-transparent body passing before it, and through which the luminous surface is visible. The luminosity changed in color by the density of the intervening object. This conclusion is forced upon us by the evidence, but it involves the admission that the moon shines with the light of its own, that it is not a reflector of the sun's light, but absolutely self-luminous. Although this admission is logically compulsory, it will be useful and strictly zetetic to collect all the evidence possible which bears upon it. And so both Enoch and Samuel Burley Robotham in Zetetic Astronomy speak about and reference this lesser moon, and which is something that is most certainly not talked about. But the evidence of these lunar eclipses, which occur when both the sun and the moon are still in the horizon, absolutely affirms that it is not the shadow of the Earth, which of course it could never be the shadow of the Earth, because the Earth is always beneath both the sun and the moon as they move in circuit above the face of the Earth. And so Enoch affirms this dark companion, this lesser moon, whatever it is, as being part of the heavenly luminaries.
I've been seeing this video go around of this idea, this supposedly, I can't remember the date. We're supposed to see 2 moons in the sky. Do you think that's what we're talking about here?
Well, it certainly is a dark companion, and so whether you can see it, I think the only time you can probably see it is during a lunar eclipse or when it obstructs the luminosity of either the sun or the moon. It's one of those objects that, like the moon during lunar conjunction, when it is moving in tangent with the sun, because of the brightness of the sun and because the moon is rising when the sun rises, moving across the sky as the sun moves across the sky, and then setting when it sets, we can never see it during this particular phase, which is why it's called the dark phase of the moon. And so it's my opinion that this particular object, this lesser moon, is something of that nature. And the only time we would be able to see it is when it passes before either the sun and the moon during one of the eclipse phases.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder. I can't remember the date. I was trying to look it up, but I can't find it now. But I've seen it being posted around Facebook the other day. So, all right, I guess we'll get into some questions. And then I just want to thank you for sharing this information with us, and I thank you for doing the research, because I mean, to put it just as honestly as I can, there's no way I would have been able to research all those books anytime soon and into this stuff. And I'm thankful that there's somebody out there that's willing to do it.
I really appreciate that, man, because I can't tell you how much I'm harassed and ridiculed for studying the extra biblical material. And it's my opinion that, when you do so, it brings out so much more of what is contained within Scripture, and it gives you insight on how to understand things which may remain ambiguous within the King James or just the English translations, which again is another reason why I study from the Targums, which they predate the King James by 1,500 years, and they were the actual Aramaic translations of the original Hebrew Torah. And so I glean a lot of new information by reading those and comparing them to the foundation of the canon. And you can learn a great deal when you do that. And so that's how I present, even in this book on the firmament, all of this material together in fullness so that people can understand in great detail what the Genesis narrative is actually speaking about in the first 4 days of creation.
Definitely, man. And so, John, if you want to go ahead and bust out some of those questions so we can make sure everybody gets their questions answered. Also, John, I appreciate you. I know you're not feeling well, and I appreciate you getting these questions down, and I know our audience appreciates it so much, man. It's a blessing to have you back, because I can tell you this, a lot of questions went unanswered in your absence, but you're definitely making this easier for me.
I got to be honest with you, John. For about 10 minutes there, I had to stand up, and Patricia sat in the chair. And it's like she was all freaked out because she didn't want the camera turned on. So if you're in there, she got your questions in there. She made sure your questions got pasted in. I had to stand up and kind of walk this off a little bit. And John and Kip are the only ones that know I did that. So there you go, a little insight. So we'll start with the first questions in. This one's from Diana. She's well known to us on NYSTV. She goes in from Alishiba, but I know her as Diana. She says, I'm totally ignorant on the topic, and I've only recently started seeing some of the arguments on both sides. I know that recently a very well-known speaker and author said in an interview that he has flown around the world several times and ended up in the same place. He said because of this, he knows the Earth is a sphere and that the flat Earth movement is a psyops. Can Zen address this, or do you guys even believe that to be true?
You can circumnavigate the Hammond's plane as simply as you can going around the so-called spherical Earth. It's the same concept. You're just flying from east to west, and just like as it was shown in that particular video on the movement of the sun can move in complete circle, and the moon as well, around the polar north. And so when they circumnavigate the so-called globe, it's the same thing. And so the principle is same whether you apply it to the globe or the circle of the Earth, that you can most certainly circumnavigate around, moving from east to west, no matter which way you go, that you'll end up in the same place.
What would you say to people that say that this flat Earth is a psyops?
They haven't done their research in it, and it's my opinion that they are saying such things in order to nullify them investigating and looking into it at all. And for those that think it's a psyop, I always go back to this one thing. Just do your investigation on the Michelson-Morley and Michelson-Morley Gale, the Sagnac and the Aries failure, which are scientific experiments which were performed. They were conducted by heliocentrists during the early 1800s as experiments to detect and to affirm the rate of the velocity of the Earth in its motion as it's supposedly spinning once daily, once every 24 hours, because The heliocentric model says that it's the spinning of the Earth on its axis which causes the sun, which is supposedly the center of the solar system, to rise in the east and to set in the west. And it could only maintain such motion if it is the Earth that is spinning. But the whole phenomena of the midnight sun, where on the summer solstice in the very northern latitudes near the Arctic Circle, you can see the sun move in circle just as we depicted it in that video, from the east to the south to the west to the north and back to the east in complete circle, and it will remain above the horizon for days at a time. There's no way possible that such could happen on an Earth that is spinning and that causes the sun to rise. For the sun to circle, in complete circle and remain above the horizon, there's no way they can explain that on a supposed globe where the sun is at the center of a solar system and it's the Earth spinning that causes the sun to rise in the east and set in the west. There's no way to explain its motion back towards the north and back towards the east, but is very simply explained in, like as I showed in the Book of Enoch and also the Book of Ecclesiastes, and those scientific experiments affirm that the Earth is in no way moving. Case closed. I mean, that is verifiable, irrefutable scientific evidence, repeatable, that scientists can do in this day and age. And because they don't want you to know about those things, they don't teach about it in school, but you can look it up and you can study it for yourself. Those are 4 scientific experiments that all verify that the Earth is not moving, as is recited and affirmed in the biblical scriptures, in chapters like 1 Chronicles 93:10, I believe it is, and there's so many different verses in the scriptures which affirm that the Earth is not moving and that it is stationary and fixed. And the real scientific evidence also affirms that. And so, psyops, I mean, the science actually affirms that this is not a psyop and that this is the truth.
Well, you get a lot of that, Zen, when people say it's a psyop, or they'll call folks who study and research this stuff paranoid, and it always goes back on them because they don't want to do the research, like you said. They don't want to read the scriptures and actually take it in context. So that was a great answer. But the next one goes right into the Earth spinning. This one comes from DM Makewater Moore. Does this dome spin? Is the dome spinning?
Well, it speaks about the heavenly circles, that there are 7 circles, but and so yes, they do spin, but it's the skies and the stars and these 7 portions, whether they are part of the actual structure of the dome, very doubtful, because in my opinion, the actual vaulted dome of the Earth is a solid structure, and it's immovable, impenetrable, indestructible. But the 7 layers, the 7 heavens of the heavenly circle, as described in Enoch, the Sefer Yetzirah, like when you read my book, this Firmament Vaulted Dome of the Earth, I share many passages which describe, just like with what I just read about, in the book of the Secrets of Enoch, where Enoch describes these 7 planets, Chrono, Aphrodite, Hermes, Mars. These 5 planets with the sun and the moon, they all occupy a different level of these 7 heavens, and those move, and you can see that affirmed with like the time-lapse photography. When you take the time-lapse photography and you string a bunch of them together and you create a video, you can see how all of the celestial luminaries move in circle around Polaris as the fixed star, the center of the celestial firmament. And so most certainly they are moving because the Earth is not moving, and you can see that the stars move in circle above us.
Okay, very cool. Diana comes back with another question, and it's very interesting because I heard you and Rob talk about it. I believe it was last night. You got into Admiral Byrd. She says, okay, guys, how about the hollow earth thing? Admiral Byrd, flat earth is not necessarily debunked by that. Could there be something to that?
I do believe that there is something to that because I believe it's in Job 26:7 where it speaks about in the north that there's a place where hell lies open, exposed, and you can see down into it. And that also, as D13 speaks about with the Taurus field, there's a opening, there's a vortex, a polar opening um, in the North Pole that goes both up towards the throne of God as well as descending down into Sheol, into the center of the earth. And so it does reference this in the scriptures, and it talks about even how it descends down the 7 levels, because there's not only 7 levels of heaven, but there's 7 levels of hell, and they drop down into what is called the bottomless pit, the great abyss. That is that that central point, the deepest part of the deepest levels of Sheol. Just like you have the above Polaris in Enoch chapter 15 in his vision of being taken through to the presence and to the throne of the Most High God. He described going through what looks like a tongue of fire, a vortex, and that he is then brought before the presence of the Most High God. And it's my opinion that he was taken through what are referenced, as the windows of heaven, that there is a window with each one of these heavens, and it was these windows which were opened to allow the waters above to come in and inundate the earth during the flood of Noah's day. And that there's also 7 fountains of the deep. Same thing. In the Book of Jubilees, and I share this in a chapter that I wrote on the windows in heaven in this new book. It affirms there being 7 levels for the windows of heaven in the heavens, and 7 layers for the great fountains of the earth, which the fountains of the earth were closed, and the windows of the heaven were opened to allow the flood waters to come in, inundate, and to collect until every mountain was submerged during the flood of Noah's day.
Very cool. Okay, I know you got your thinking cap on, Zen. This one comes from, let's see, Admiral Byrd. This one's from Galen Long. Didn't Columbus think the world was flat? Did you ever get into that?
I did hear, in studying about the North Pole and those that made journey to it, that Columbus made a journey up towards that way because he knew that the world was in the shape of what Gerard Mercator depicts in some of his Mercator projection maps, and in some of those older maps, like the 1500, the 1577, 1587 map, he shows at the very center of the North Pole that there's this black magnetic mountain called the Rupus Negra, and he describes the various explorers that made and successfully made journey up there. And in a letter that he wrote to John Dee in 1577, he describes this magnetic lodestone rock being at the very center of the North Pole, and then he describes this whirlpool which surrounds it that descends down into the depths of hell. And he also describes 4 rivers, these 4 rivers being drawn into this great whirlpool. And there's another book called the Invencio Fortunata, which describes other explorers that also succeeded in going towards the North Pole. And so all of this will be part of my next book on Paradise and the Sides of the North, because I had to split off all of that information from this book in order to not exceed 700 pages, which is what it would have been if I would have included all that material.
Very cool. Allison Ellis, she asked, can Zen provide some of the links to these works that he's using? I would very much like to read them as well. Is there any place she can go to find some of the research materials that you've used?
Yeah, you can actually go to a website called Sacred Text. It's sacred-text.com, and many of them are located there, and you can find much of this information. All of that I had mentioned this evening, the Book of the Secrets of Enoch, the Book of the Bee, the Chronicles of Jeremiah, the Cave of Treasures, Flavius Josephus's writings, all of that material is there, plus so much more. I mean, it's a very extensive database, and it's all free.
Excellent. Can you repeat that one more time? The sacredtext.com?
Yeah, it's sacred-text.com.
Thank you. Okay, so Sean Lumen, I believe I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Can it be explained by Scripture, the possible vulnerability of God and the real meaning of the attempt of Nimrod in the Tower of Babel? How could it be real concern of our Father? How could he ever be overcome?
This is actually a great question, and it's something that I was going to share with Rob last night, because I found this passage which speaks about this, and you're going to find this totally fascinating, and this will actually be the first time that I share it. I'm going to read it. It says this, and this is also from the Chronicles of Jeremiah. It says this: in this way were their evil intentions were frustrated, and they ceased building the tower, and the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. For they had said, come and let us build for ourselves a city, and let us take axes and break open the firmament, so that the water flow from there and descend below, that he may not do unto us as he did to the generation of the flood. And let us wage war with those in heaven, and establish ourselves there as gods. And so this is talking about Nimrod, and basically, because that was the first New World Order under Nimrod, because he basically united everybody as a one world people. But they, him describing, let's take axes and break open the firmament. Well, that affirms that the firmament was a solid structure, that they knew it was a solid structure, and that their attempts to break it open was so that they couldn't be flooded again. But what they didn't realize is that if they would have broke open the firmament, that the earth would have been flooded again. And so, I just thought it was an interesting passage. But yeah, they were attempting to reach into heavens to war with the gods, because they basically believed and followed all of the fallen angels, and took them as their gods, as a pantheon of their gods, and they believed that they too could be as gods themselves. And so, which is basically like the whole New Age mythology, that we can all ascend to be Christ ourselves or gods ourselves, and so they, like Lucifer, in thinking that he could actually, being a creature, an angel created by the Most High, that he could become like the Most High. Really, he never even had a chance, but a lot of people think they do.
I don't know if you mentioned it. I know you spoke with Rob, during last night's interview. You had spoken that Hazatan had taken Yeshua up to a mountain that was, right, a high mountain. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, this all has to do with the Rupus Negra, which again is that huge magnetic mountain which is at the very North Pole. Because supposedly, according to the mythology, this mountain is taller than all of the other mountains of the world, including Everest. And it's so tall, according to the mythology, that if the sun and the moon ever moved in circuit above it, that they would run into the topper half of its upper pinnacle. And it's my opinion that this is the mountain that Lucifer references in Isaiah 14 as being the mount of the congregation. Because the mount of the congregation, when you look up and study it, that is the mountain where, like in the Greek mythology, Mount Olympus, where all the gods, the home of the gods, where they all meet, and that supposedly this mountain reaches way up into the clouds to the very throne of God, and that when the angels want to go and meet with the Most High God, they go here to this mountain, that this is the Jacob's ladder, and that they ascend in the sides of the north up to the throne of God when they congregate with him to hold council, like it references in Job chapter 1 and also in Psalms 82 as the congregation of the mighty, the council of the mighty, when the sons of God meet with the Most High God, that it takes place above this mount of the congregation. And it's my opinion that this is also the mountain which is referenced in the temptation of Yeshua when Satan took him to a very high, exceedingly high mountain, that because this mountain sits at the very center of the earth plane at the very North Pole, it would make sense that this would be the point which from Yeshua then Satan could offer him all the kingdoms of the world, because all the kingdoms of the world would be encompassing encircle this high plateau, this high mountain, and looking out in all directions, you would actually see all the kingdoms of the world.
Very cool. So we go on to Marcel LeMay's question. Question for Zen. Does he think that there is more land at the North Pole than what the maps globe show?
At the North Pole? Yeah, according to the explorers' testimony themselves, they speak about not only this magnetic lodestone mountain, but they also speak about these four surrounding mountains which divert the four rivers that divert off from this central whirlpool, and that all of these waterways are drawn into this whirlpool. And it describes that these explorers, when they went up there in their wooden ships, that the attraction, the iron of their ships, the nails which created their ships, were so strongly attracted to this magnetic lodestone mountain that they were unable to prevent themselves from being drawn into it, and that many of their ships were destroyed from being pulled into this whirlpool and drawn into this magnetic lodestone mountain. But I would definitely recommend people read both Mercator's letter to John Dee, the 1577 letter to John Dee, and also Inventio Fortunata, which is a 14th century book that describes all of these different polar explorers that were able to go to the north and to discover different peoples and different lands up there, which are not accounted for in any of the maps. And it's interesting that even in the globe maps, whenever you look at any of these modern maps, that the last time you see anything really depicted is in the 14th century maps done by Mercator. but that all the rest of these modern maps leave the polar north as just being an open Arctic Sea. But there is land affirmed as being up there. And even Arthur, King Arthur, he was said to, in the mythology, said to have made journeys up that way and to have sent people to colonize this particular land. And there's many mythologies when you really begin to study and look into the mythologies surrounding the North Pole as like a William Warren, he wrote an entire book called um, The North Pole as Cradle of Humanity. And he discusses all the mythology surrounding like the Hyperboreans and Asgard, Shambhala, Thule, all of these mystical places, even Atlantis is speculated as perhaps being once part of the northern polar plains and those particular regions. And there's a lot of mythologies which speak of, these mystical lands and mystical peoples that once lived there during these very ancient antediluvian and pre-Adamic times.
Very cool. So we're going to get to Ed Taylor's question. He said, does Zen see any connection with the Ruach of Yahweh and the firmament? Example, hovering in Genesis 1, and then withdrawal reference proceeding at the flood.
Yeah, I do see, and even the Shekinah, when you read, again, the Targums, there's a reference to the Shekinah many times, and also the Memra of the Lord, which is the Word of God. And there's references to the firmament, and as I said, with all these different prophets, with their descriptions of the heavenly temple and the throne of God as being established, it's established upon the firmament, and so there's all these connections, and I cite this in many chapters in this new book, and I share each one of those various descriptions, and I also share in different chapter the different accounts of the various prophets in their journeys through the 10 heavens or the 7 heavens, like for instance the Apocalypse of Paul, the Ascension of Isaiah, and the Book of the Secrets of Enoch, because each one of the prophets describes being taken up through the 7 heavens and being brought before the face of the Most High God and being brought before the presence of God. And they describe the throne of God, the Most High God, Yeshua, the Holy Spirit. I mean, they describe all of this in their, in the expressions in their journals of their journeys, and it's a fascinating account. And also, I break down each one of the heavens according to these various testimonies, so that people can get a better understanding of what is listed and depicted as being at each one of these different levels.
Wow. Okay, well, we're going to move on to Aaron Brandon Burke's question. Rob asked Zen about meteorite showers, etc. on Flat Earth on his show. Can you please ask Zen if he thinks maybe meteor showers and other such phenomena might be a periodic instance similar to Revelations 8:5, where an angel takes fire out of the altar of heaven and casts it down?
I do think that there's some connection, because the meteor showers are periodic. You see, I believe it's the Perseid meteor shower. I forget the name of the other one, but one occurs during the summer months, and then another one occurs during the winter months. And it's like clockwork. Every time when those portions of the year, and for those that understand how the sun moves through the 12 houses of the zodiac over the course of a year, that he spends a different month in a different one of these signs of the zodiac. And so it's my opinion that when he gets to these specific signs that there's a portion of the heavens that containing debris. I don't know exactly what it is, but there's interaction with the sun being in those portions of the sky, in those particular signs of the zodiac, which cause these meteor showers to occur. And so, because of their periodic and clockwork type nature, it is my opinion that they are part of the movement of the heavenly circles, where these stars, as these celestial luminaries, are fashioned and hold circuit.
Very cool. That's you have done your homework. This one comes from Giorgio. What is the dome made of, and is there any land behind the Arctic wall?
Well, it says that there's many references to the firmament as being a crystal structure, and so it's my opinion that it's some kind of perhaps semi-transparent, transparent quartz-like, maybe, and quartz in itself casts rainbows, and there are many times where rainbows are associated with the throne of God. And also, because of the semi-transparent nature, it's my opinion that the reason we see the sky as being blue is because we are seeing the waters that are still above the firmament, and that the firmament was established to divide the waters from below from the waters from above, and that the waters above still being up there is the reason that we see the sky as blue. And this is also why we see in the various accounts the color sapphire as being associated with the throne of God and with the firmament. Like Moses in Exodus 24:10, he speaks about a paved work of sapphire stone. And so it's my opinion that the reason we have these associations is because the firmament is crystalline, and even Flavius Josephus, he describes it as such. There's a book called The Legends of the Jews by Ginsburg, which also speaks about the firmament as being crystalline. John, he speaks of it as being a sea of glass like unto crystal. And when you look up that word crystal, it's the Greek word crystallos, which means like a crystal semi-precious stone. And in the many different accounts that I share on the second day of creation, where I do this comparative study, there are many references to the firmament as being some kind of crystalline stone, whether precious or semi-precious stone. There's many descriptions of it being formed out of crystal.
All right, Zen, that's all the questions. Thanks, John, for asking those. What we'll do, I appreciate you coming on, by the way, Zen. And for those of you who want to learn more about this, I would suggest watching the videos that Rob did with Zen. Very informative. They went into a lot of detail on that stuff, and also the book. And so I just want to thank you, Zen. If you don't mind, stay on after this broadcast for a second. I had a couple questions for you, personal questions for you. And I just want to thank you so much. Thank you guys for listening and for your questions. If you haven't signed up for our email reminders or our text reminders, go on to NYSTV.org's page. Sign up for those. You'll get a reminder every time we have a show. We've got a lot of people signed up for them, and we don't. I want to apologize because the other day we did a show and I forgot to send out a text message, and I just forgot. Also, every time I send out a text message, it costs me like $5 every time I send it out because there's so many people that signed up, and that's a good problem. I don't have a problem with that. The more people signed up, the more it costs me, but at the same time, it's a good problem to have. So I have no problem doing it. I forgot to do it for that show. I didn't know for sure if the show was going to go on. The one we did Saturday, it was supposed to be with Zachary Bauer. He didn't end up showing up, so we just went ahead and continued the show. The show ended up being a big blessing to a lot of people, actually. I've never gotten so many emails in my life of people saying that, this something changed their life, or they've, in such a short amount of time. Have you, John? I mean, it was really, it was a blessing that we continued the show anyway without Zachary Bauer, and it was really good. But I apologize for not sending that out. had a lot of setbacks. John's had the surgery. I had a death in the family. Just a bunch of random stuff that's been happening. So, I mean, we've just been set back
Last
on. But
week was a bad week.
Yeah, it was a bad week. So
It's a
we've
bad
been,
week.
but normally we send them out. So sign up for them. They're free to sign up. You guys just get the text that tells you when we're going on, or you get the email that tells you when we're going on, and we'll continue with that. Also, we still have the deal with L.A. Marzulli, now NYSTV exclusive offer. I don't know how much longer it's going to last. So if you haven't ordered Watchers 10, go ahead and order it on there. You also get a lot of other free stuff. It's a good deal and it's awesome. So, and it also helps support NYSTV as well when you do it. It's actually on our page as well. Tomorrow, Virtual House Church with Rob Skiba. Rob Skiba's not going to actually be there for the Virtual House Church because he's doing a conference. We will still have the teaching, the audio, the reading of the book and the Torah portion, and we will also still do questions and stuff on it. So please make sure you join us tomorrow to do that. I will be in at that Green Man Festival or whatever it is, the Green Man
in
in
Hopkinsville.
But I'm still going to be on there doing that after, in the midst of it. So
I was going to go with you. You know that, right?
I know you were going to go.
Now
with
I
me.
can't go.
You can't go now. So I got Jake, our intern guy, going with me. He's going to help me film, and it'll be cool. We should get some pretty cool footage from that. I'm gonna go around asking questions and check out and see what it's all about. I don't really know the story of what happened, but supposedly there was a visitation there from Green Men that happened many years ago, and they have a story about it, and it's a little festival thing they have, so it should be interesting.
I just want to give a shout out to Zippity Doodah.
Yeah, Zippity Doodah. Yeah, the comment troll. Every time we do a video, he can't stand when me and John talk. He wants to hear the guests. He don't want to hear us talk at all. So we're gonna ramble on a little extra each time.
So yeah, we'll just sit here and talk a little bit. Don't make me laugh too much.
We'll just ramble on as much as we want now, Zippity Doodah.
That's what I think. That's for you, buddy.
But anyways, thank you guys for joining us. I don't know, there's other stuff coming up. Obviously, Saturday, True Frequency Radio, we go on from 2 to 4 Central on True Frequency Radio Live. I'm not sure what we're going to be talking about this Saturday, but I can tell you this, it will be interesting. I know I don't know if did we confirm with you, Zen, for Saturday? If we didn't, we can confirm for another time for True Frequency Radio. But if not, we got another guest on standby.
It's not like Zen doesn't know Truth Frequency.
Oh yeah, he's on there all the time anyway. So
right. Yeah. Well, let me make sure that I can get this mic situated.
Well, we can have you on a different later time, dude. It's no big deal. I got a backup guest anyway. I couldn't remember if I scheduled you or not on there, but I've been horrible with my scheduling lately, and it's been.
I understand, man. You're so busy, brother.
Yeah, we got a lot of good stuff coming up, though, in the future. But anyway, shalom, everybody. High five. And remember to stay on here. I want to talk to you about something.
All right, brother.
Be blessed.
Shalom, everyone.